Woman is falsely accused of a crime. Her clever plan to prove her innocence leaves everyone stunned and admiring her courage. The sun shone brightly over the small town of Maplewood, casting long shadows on the cobblestone streets. It was a day like any other, with children laughing and playing in the park, and birds chirping merrily in the trees. Elowen Hartley stood in her cozy kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. She smiled to herself, savoring the quiet moments. Just as she reached for her favorite mug, the phone rang, breaking the peacefulness of her morning. With a furrowed brow, Elowen picked up the receiver. "Sheriff Thompson?" she asked, recognizing the voice on the other end. "Elowen, I'm afraid I have some troubling news," the sheriff said, his tone serious. "What is it?" Elowen's heart began to race. "It's about Jason. He's been found, under suspicious circumstances." The words hung heavy in the air, wrapping around her like a cold shroud. Jason was her favorite student, a bright young man with dreams bigger than the sky. Confusion swirled in her mind as she tried to process the sheriff's words. "What do you mean, suspicious?" "His parents are worried. There are rumors, Elowen. You've got to come down to the station." Elowen's heart sank. She felt dread creeping into her chest. "I'll be there," she managed to say, her voice trembling. As she hung up the phone, the reality of the situation began to sink in. She had always been a pillar of support for her students, a mentor who encouraged them to pursue their passions. But now, whispers would spread like wildfire, and her connection to Jason would be scrutinized. How had everything turned so dark so quickly? The drive to the sheriff's office felt like an eternity. Elowen's mind raced with questions. Had Jason been in trouble? Had she missed the signs? The once admiring townsfolk she had known for years would soon look at her with doubt. The thought twisted in her stomach like a knife. As she entered the station, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Sheriff Thompson met her gaze, his expression grave. "Elowen, there are accusations against you. Some believe you had a role in this." "Accusations? Against me?" Her voice trembled, disbelief flooding her senses. "I have always supported Jason. He was like family to me." "I know," the sheriff replied gently, "but the community is hurting. They need someone to blame." Betrayal washed over her. The very people she had devoted her life to teaching and guiding were now turning against her. How could they think she would harm Jason? He was a bright light in her life, a student she had nurtured through thick and thin. "Who could say such a thing?" she demanded, her voice rising. "People are scared, Elowen. They don't understand what happened. Rumors can be powerful." "Powerful." The word echoed in her mind. A sense of urgency began to envelop her. She had to act quickly, to clear her name before the town's whispers turned into shouts. She could not let this community destroy her life based on unfounded fears. Elowen took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I won't let them ruin my life without a fight," she declared, determination burning within her. As she stepped out of the station, Elowen felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The sun still shone, but it felt distant, like a fading memory. She had to reclaim her innocence, to prove to the town that she was not the enemy. The road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready to confront the shadows lurking in her life. What would she uncover as she sought the truth? Would the town see her for who she truly was, or would they remain blinded by their fears? The questions loomed in her mind, pushing her forward into the unknown. Elowen knew one thing: she would not back down. Elowen Hartley sat in her small art classroom, the sunlight pouring through the large windows. Paintings made by her students adorned the walls, each one telling a story of creativity and passion. As she looked around, memories flooded back to her. Laughter echoed in her mind, moments filled with joy and discovery. "Remember when we painted that giant mural?" she thought, smiling at the memory of her students working together, their faces smeared with bright colors. "You all thought you could make it look like a dragon, but it ended up looking like a colorful lizard." In those moments, Elowen felt alive. She loved teaching, guiding her students as they explored their artistic talents. Each smile, each spark of inspiration, was a reminder of why she chose this path. She had built deep bonds with her students, bonds that now seemed fragile and broken. But now, as she sat in the classroom, the weight of the recent news pressed heavily on her heart. The faces of her students that once gleamed with admiration now seemed clouded with doubt. The cheerful chatter that used to fill the room was replaced by whispers that carried a bitter sting. Elowyn felt the warmth of the sun fade, leaving her in a cold shadow of despair. Later that day, Elowyn met Julian at the small cafe in town. He was her childhood friend and had always been there for her, especially during tough times. She needed him now more than ever. As they sat across from each other, the smell of coffee filled the air, but Elowyn could hardly taste it. "Julian, I don't understand how this happened," she said, her voice trembling. "I've always tried to be a good teacher. Why would they think I could hurt my students?" Julian leaned in, his expression serious. "People react out of fear, Elowyn. They see something they don't understand and panic. You've done nothing wrong." Tears welled in her eyes. "But it feels like they've turned against me. They used to respect me, Julian. Now, I feel like an outsider in my own town." Julian reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "We will figure this out. You are not alone in this. We need to find the truth and show them what really happened." Elowyn took a deep breath, feeling a flicker of hope. "What if I can't? What if they don't believe me?" "They will believe you once they see the truth. Let's start by gathering information. Talk to your students, see what they know," Julian advised, his voice steady. Elowyn nodded, determination creeping back into her heart. "You're right. I can't just sit here and let them think I'm guilty. I need to fight for my name." The two spent the next few hours brainstorming a plan. They discussed everything from speaking with students to reviewing any evidence that could help her case. Elowyn felt the urgency of the moment, the need to act quickly. "Julian, I want to go back to the school tomorrow," she said, her voice stronger now. "I want to talk to my students and find out what they're saying." "Good idea," he replied. "But remember, keep calm. They might be scared or confused. You need to show them you're still the same Elowyn they love." As they finished their coffee, Elowyn's heart raced with a mix of anxiety and hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but she felt less alone with Julian by her side. Together, they would uncover the truth, and she would reclaim her place in the community. Driving home that evening, Elowyn gazed out at the setting sun, its golden rays fading into the horizon. She thought of her students, the laughter they shared, and the love she had for her craft. She would not let the darkness of suspicion swallow her whole. The fight for her truth had just begun, and she was ready to stand tall, no matter what awaited her. Elowyn Hartley sat in her small, cluttered office, the sunlight streaming through the window, but not reaching her heart. She had spent hours going through her students' belongings, searching for answers. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on her. With every page she turned, she felt the world around her shift, and she needed to find the truth. While rummaging through a stack of papers, Elowyn stumbled upon a small, worn diary. Its cover was faded, and the pages looked old, but it felt important. She opened it carefully, her heart racing. The handwriting was shaky and filled with emotion. The first entry caught her attention. "I feel so alone. No one understands me. Everyone thinks I have it all, but they don't see the truth." Elowyn's breath caught in her throat. She flipped through more pages, each entry revealing insecurities and feelings of jealousy. The diary belonged to Sarah, the student who had accused her. As Elowyn read, she felt a mix of sadness and anger. Sarah wrote about feeling overshadowed by her peers and struggling to fit in. Elowyn realized that these feelings might have led Sarah to lash out. "This is why she did it," Elowyn whispered to herself, her fingers trembling as she turned another page. "She thought that by hurting me, she could feel better about herself." The emotional weight of this discovery hit Elowyn hard. It was one thing to be accused unjustly, but to understand the pain behind it added another layer of complexity. She thought about what it meant to expose Sarah's betrayal. Would sharing this information hurt Sarah more than it would help her? "What do I do now?" Ilawan asked aloud, her voice echoing in the empty room. She felt trapped between her desire to clear her name and the fear of causing more harm. Just then, her childhood friend Julian knocked softly on the door before entering. He could see the distress in her eyes. "Ilawan, what's wrong?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Ilawan held up the diary, her hands shaking. "It's Sarah's. She wrote all of this, about her feelings, her struggles. It makes sense now. I can't believe she felt this way." Julian took a seat beside her, looking at the diary with a furrowed brow. "This is a big discovery, but you need to think about how to handle it. If you expose her, it could hurt her even more." "I know," Ilawan replied, her voice thick with emotion. "But if I don't say anything, everyone will continue to think I'm guilty. I want to show them the truth, but it's not just about me anymore." Julian nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "You're in a tough spot. It's not just about clearing your name, it's about Sarah's well-being too. You need to find a way to balance both." Ilawan closed the diary, the weight of her decision heavy on her shoulders. "I just wish people could understand how complicated this all is. The truth isn't always black and white." "Maybe you can talk to Sarah first," Julian suggested. "Find out how she feels about everything. You might be able to work together to find a solution that doesn't hurt either of you." Ilawan considered his words. The idea of speaking to Sarah filled her with anxiety, yet it also sparked a flicker of hope. Maybe there was a way to resolve this without further conflict. "You're right. I need to face her. I need to understand her side of the story." With newfound determination, Ilawan placed the diary on her desk and took a deep breath. She knew that the path ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to confront both her accuser and her own fears. "I won't let fear dictate my actions," she said firmly, her mind set on the next steps. As she prepared for the confrontation, she felt a mix of fear and strength. Ilawan knew this was not just about her. It was about understanding, compassion, and the complicated nature of truth. She was ready to face whatever came next, not just for herself, but for Sarah too. The journey ahead would require courage and empathy, but Ilawan was determined to find a way forward. Ilawan stood outside the small, dimly lit cafe where she had arranged to meet her young accuser, Brianna. The weight of new evidence pressed heavily in her pocket, a reminder of the truth she was desperate to uncover. The air was thick with tension as she watched the door, her heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. When Brianna finally stepped out, her face was a mask of uncertainty. She looked around, her eyes darting before landing on Ilawan. The teacher took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside her. This was not about revenge, it was about understanding. "Brianna," Ilawan called softly, her voice steady despite the turmoil within her. "Can we talk?" Brianna hesitated, then nodded slowly. The two moved to a secluded corner of the cafe, away from prying eyes. Ilawan pulled out the diary she had found, its pages filled with Brianna's raw emotions. "I found this," Ilawan said, her voice gentle as she handed the diary to the girl. "I want to understand what you were feeling when you made those accusations." Brianna's eyes widened in shock. "You read that? You shouldn't have." "I know," Ilawan replied, "but it's important. I want to hear your side. What made you say those things about me?" Brianna looked down, shame washing over her face. "I was scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought if I said something, people would pay attention to me. I felt invisible." Ilawan's heart ached at the girl's confession. "You felt like no one cared?" "Yeah," Brianna said, tears brimming in her eyes. "I thought you were the only one who could help me. But when I saw everyone supporting you, I got jealous. I didn't know how to handle it." Taking a moment to process Brianna's words, Ilawan felt a swell of compassion. "Brianna, I can't imagine how hard that must have been for you. But hurting others is not the answer. I want to help you find a better way." Brianna looked up, confusion mixed with hope in her gaze. "You're not mad at me?" No, I'm not, Elowen replied, her voice firm yet kind. I want to understand you. We all make mistakes. What matters is how we move forward. The young girl wiped her tears, her defenses slowly crumbling. I didn't think anyone would care about my feelings. I just wanted to be noticed. Elowen nodded, her heart swelling with empathy. We all want to be seen, Brianna. But there are ways to ask for help that don't hurt others. Let's work on that together. This moment of connection transformed the confrontation. Brianna, once an adversary, now appeared vulnerable and searching for understanding. Elowen reached out and placed a comforting hand on the girl's shoulder. You have so much potential, Elowen said encouragingly. Let's turn this around. You can help me tell the truth, and together, we can show everyone that empathy is more powerful than judgment. Brianna looked at Elowen with newfound determination. Do you really think we can fix this? I believe we can, Elowen replied, her heart filled with hope. But it starts with being honest with ourselves and with others. As they spoke, the cafe buzzed with life around them, but Elowen felt as if they were in their own world. The conversation shifted from accusations to healing, and for the first time in weeks, Elowen felt a sense of peace. When they parted ways, Brianna smiled faintly, the weight of her burdens seeming a little lighter. Elowen watched her go, realizing that this encounter would change not only their lives, but also the way the community viewed the situation. Back in her own world, Elowen felt renewed. She understood now that being a victim didn't mean she had to stop being a defender of truth. Instead, she could show others the power of compassion and understanding, paving the way for a deeper connection within her community. As she walked home, Elowen felt a spark of hope igniting within her. This pivotal moment had not only changed her relationship with Brianna, but also opened the door for broader conversations about empathy, judgment, and the complexities of human relationships in her small town. Elowen stood in front of her bathroom mirror, her heart racing. She stared at her reflection, taking deep breaths to calm the storm inside her. Today was the day she would share her findings with the community. The weight of the truth felt heavy on her shoulders, but she knew she had to do it. Her hands trembled slightly as she brushed her hair back, and she whispered to herself, "You can do this." As she made her way to the town hall, Elowen could feel the tension in the air. People were gathering, their faces a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The hall was filled with familiar faces, students, parents, and colleagues, yet they felt distant to her. She took a moment to gather her thoughts before stepping into the room. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. People were murmuring among themselves, and Elowen could hear snippets of conversation. "Did you hear what she did?" And, "I can't believe she's still here." The whispers stung, but she pushed through the pain. Elowen took her place at the front, looking out at the crowd. She felt small, but she reminded herself why she was there. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady but soft. "I know there has been a lot of confusion and hurt lately, and I want to share what I have found." As she spoke, she noticed a few faces soften, while others remained hard with doubt. "I have gathered evidence that shows my innocence," Elowen continued, her heart pounding. "This is not just about me, it's about understanding what really happened to my student." She held up the diary she had found, its pages worn and filled with the young accuser's thoughts. "This diary reveals the pain and jealousy that led to the accusations against me. It shows that we need to look deeper before we judge." There was a murmur in the crowd. Some faces changed, their expressions shifting from disbelief to concern. Elowen could see a few people leaning in, eager to hear more. "Please, listen," she urged, her voice rising slightly. "This isn't just about one person's mistake. It's about how we treat each other. It's about empathy." She looked around, making eye contact with those who had once admired her. "I know I am not perfect, and I have made mistakes, but so have we all. We need to learn from this." A voice broke through the crowd. "But how can we trust you after what happened?" It was a former colleague, someone who had stood by her side before everything changed. Elowen took a deep breath. I understand your doubts. Trust takes time to rebuild, but I hope you can see that I am here, not just to defend myself, but to encourage us all to think about our actions. She paused, letting her words sink in. I want us to be better, together. As she continued, Elowen spoke of the importance of compassion and the dangers of making quick judgments. She shared stories of her students, their struggles and dreams, and how they deserved a community that believed in them. The room grew quieter, the tension slowly shifting as people began to listen. One student stood up, her voice shaking. Ms. Hartley, I always believed in you. I knew you wouldn't do something like that. Elowen's heart swelled with gratitude. The young girl's words seemed to ignite something in the room. I appreciate your courage to speak up, Elowen replied, her voice warm. We need to support each other, especially when things get tough. It's easy to point fingers, but it takes strength to lift each other up. Slowly, more people began to nod in agreement. Elowen felt a glimmer of hope. The atmosphere was shifting, and she could sense that the townspeople were starting to reconsider their past judgments. As she wrapped up her presentation, Elowen looked around the room, her eyes filled with determination. Let us move forward with understanding and empathy. Let's learn from this so we can create a better community for everyone. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was filled with a sense of possibility. Elowen's bravery and vulnerability had reached the hearts of those present, sparking conversations about compassion and the need to think before acting. As she stepped down from the podium, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had shared her truth, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope for the future. Elowen Hartley sat quietly in her small, sunlit classroom, the sounds of children laughing outside drifting through the open windows. The chaos of the past weeks had quieted, but the weight of emotions still pressed heavily on her heart. She felt a strange mix of relief and anger bubbling beneath her calm exterior. The truth was out, but the journey had been painful. As she looked around the room, memories flooded back, paint splattered on the walls, the joyful chaos of art projects, and the eager faces of her students. I missed this, she whispered to herself, a soft smile breaking through her tension. Just then, the door creaked open, and in walked a familiar face, Julian, her childhood friend and lawyer. Hey, Elowen, he greeted, his eyes warm with concern. How are you holding up? I'm trying to find my footing again, she replied, her voice steady. It's hard to believe everything that happened. I just feel lost. Julian nodded, understanding the depth of her feelings. It's okay to feel that way. You went through a lot, but you also showed incredible strength. The community needs to see that. Elowen felt a flicker of hope at his words. Do you think they will really understand? I mean, I was their favorite teacher, and now… She trailed off, her eyes clouding with doubt. They will come around, Julian assured her. It will take time, but you have already taken the first step by standing up for yourself. Just look at the way they reacted at the meeting. Elowen recalled the community meeting, the way the townspeople's faces shifted from skepticism to understanding as she shared her side of the story. Some of them looked so shocked, she said softly. I didn't expect that. People often react out of fear or misunderstanding, Julian replied. But you showed them the truth. Now, they need to work on rebuilding trust. As they spoke, Elowen felt a renewed sense of purpose rise within her. I want to help them understand what really happened. I want to teach them about compassion and empathy. Julian smiled, his eyes lighting up with pride. That's the spirit. You can do this. Start with your students. They look up to you. With determination, Elowen decided to gather her class. She wanted to create an open dialogue about the events that transpired and the lessons learned. Let's make this a safe space for everyone, she thought. Later that day, she stood in front of her students, their eyes filled with curiosity. Class, I want to talk about something important, she began, her voice steady. It's about what happened a few weeks ago. I know many of you have questions. The room fell silent, and then a brave hand shot up. Ms. Hartley, why did people believe the bad things about you? Elowen took a deep breath, grateful for the chance to explain. Sometimes, people jump to conclusions without knowing the whole story. It's easy to believe what we hear, but it's important to look deeper and understand each other. Another student piped in, but what if we make mistakes? How do we fix them? Elowen smiled at their eagerness to learn. We can fix mistakes by talking to each other and listening. Empathy is key. It helps us understand why someone acted a certain way. As the discussion continued, Elowen noticed a shift in the room. The students began sharing their own experiences of misunderstanding and hurt. They were learning together, slowly building a culture of understanding. After the class, Elowen felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. She realized that her purpose was not only to teach art, but to guide her students in becoming compassionate individuals. This is just the beginning, she thought, a smile creeping onto her face. In the following weeks, the community began to heal. People approached Elowen with newfound respect, acknowledging their mistakes and vowing to support her. We let fear cloud our judgment, one neighbor admitted. We are sorry, Elowen. Her heart swelled with gratitude. Thank you for being brave enough to speak up, she replied, feeling the warmth of reconciliation. As Elowen reflected on her journey, she understood that she was no longer just a victim of a scandal. She had transformed into an advocate for truth and compassion. With every step she took, she left a lasting impact on her town, reminding everyone of the power of understanding and the importance of standing together. And so, under the bright sun, Elowen Hartley found her place once more, not just as a teacher, but as a beacon of hope in a community learning to embrace empathy. Share this story if you believe that compassion can heal even the deepest wounds. Leave a comment about a time when understanding transformed a difficult situation in your life, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this one.